Many individuals have witnessed events before they actually took place. In other words, before they happened in our three-dimensional world. It is believed that events can be observed before they happen in our three-dimensional space, suggesting that there may be a plan for life on Earth that exists in another dimension and is gradually unfolding in our reality. If the events observed did not originate in this world, then, logically speaking, they must have come from elsewhere. Everything that can be observed before it happens here must be predetermined from the perspective of a person living in a three-dimensional world. So can we change what lies ahead? Lesson 1. Living in 4-dimension. I aim to highlight the potential within every individual and demonstrate that we have the power to shape our own future. Once we make a change, our future follows a predetermined path from that point onward, a future that aligns with the alteration we've made. Man's future is characterized by its remarkable flexibility. His attitudes have a greater impact than his actions. Man's concept of himself forms the foundation for everything. His actions and experiences are a direct result of his self-perception, with no other factors involved. If he had a different understanding of himself, his actions would be different. Changing one's concept of self has a direct impact on their future, while any change in their future experiences also affects their concept of self. Assumptions that may seem insignificant can actually have significant effects. It's important for us to reconsider our views on assumptions and acknowledge their ability to create change. Every transformation occurs within the realm of consciousness. The future, despite being meticulously planned, can have multiple outcomes. We are constantly faced with the decision of which path to take in our lives. Everyone has two distinct perspectives on the world, one that is grounded in nature and another that is more spiritual in nature. We can distinguish between them as our everyday awareness, which is influenced by our senses, and a focused imagination which is driven by our desires. Reality is limited to the present moment. From a straightforward perspective, the past and future exist only in our imagination. The spiritual perspective, however, perceives the contents of time. Events are perceived as separate entities, much like objects in space. The spiritual view sees the past and future as a unified whole in the present. The understanding of the spiritual man differs from that of the natural man. Our limited perception prevents us from seeing what is truly there. To develop the ability to perceive the unseen, it is helpful to regularly detach our minds from sensory evidence and instead concentrate on an invisible state. By mentally experiencing and sensing it, we can make it feel as real as our physical surroundings. When you concentrate deeply on something, other distractions fade away. All we need to do is focus on the desired state, and we will be able to see it. By redirecting our focus away from the physical realm and towards the unseen, we can cultivate a spiritual perspective that allows us to perceive the invisible. With a bit of practice, we can learn to harness the power of our imagination to shape our future according to our desires. Understanding the desire that drives action is essential. Without a desire to move, we are unable to lift a finger. We always pursue the longing that currently controls our thoughts, regardless of our actions. Breaking a habit becomes more appealing when our motivation to quit outweighs our motivation to keep going. The desires that drive us to take action are the ones that capture our focus. Desires arise when we become aware of something that is missing from our lives, something that would bring us more joy and fulfillment. Desires are often driven by personal gain, with the intensity of the desire increasing as the anticipated gain grows. Every desire is inherently selfish. When there is no potential benefit, there is no motivation, and therefore no action. The language of desire is used by the spiritual man to communicate with the natural man. Understanding and following the guidance of life is crucial for personal growth and achieving our aspirations. Following its guidance without hesitation is an instant acceptance of the desired outcome. If you want something, you can have it. According to Pascal, if you are looking for something, it means you have already found it. By believing that your wish has already come true and living and acting accordingly, you can change the future to align with your belief. Assumptions bring to life what they confirm. Once a person truly believes their wish has already come true, Their inner self will naturally find ways to make it happen and uncover the necessary methods for its realization. There is no better way to understand how we can achieve our goals than by imagining what it would be like to actually achieve them. This concept of cause and effect is fundamental. The four-dimensional self uses its broader perspective to create the necessary tools for achieving the desired outcome. It can be challenging for an undisciplined mind to embrace a state that contradicts the senses. Here is a technique that simplifies encountering events before they happen, allowing you to envision things that are not yet visible. Many individuals tend to underestimate the significance of straightforward concepts. However, this particular formula for altering the future was uncovered through extensive years of exploration and experimentation. To change the future, you must start with a strong desire. Clearly define your objective and know exactly what you want. Next, create an event that you think would happen after your desire is fulfilled. This event should indicate that your desire has been fulfilled and should be something that you have control over. Thirdly, to make it easier to understand, you can start by getting comfortable on a bed or chair and pretending to be sleepy. Close your eyes and concentrate on the action you want to imagine. Try to mentally put yourself in the situation and imagine that you are actually doing it in the present moment. It's important to fully engage in the imaginary action rather than just observing from a distance. You should strive to truly experience yourself performing the action, making the imaginary sensation feel genuine. Always keep in mind that the action you take should align with your desire. Additionally, immerse yourself in the action until it feels real and vivid. For instance, let's say you're aiming for a promotion at work. Receiving congratulations is something that typically happens when you achieve what you want. Choose this action to imagine and focus on. Relax your body and enter a relaxed state, similar to sleep, but where you can still guide your thoughts. Stay alert and attentive without any strain. Picture a friend standing in front of you. Reach out and place your hand in his. Begin by perceiving it as tangible and authentic. Then engage in a fictional dialogue that aligns with the unfolding events. Imagine yourself in the present moment, receiving congratulations for your good fortune. Instead, let's focus on the present and future. Now, the future event is a reality in a larger dimension. Surprisingly, this larger dimension is equivalent to our everyday three-dimensional space. Understanding the distinction between experiencing the present moment and imagining oneself in action can determine whether one succeeds or fails. Through my experience, I've learned the importance of simplifying and clarifying the imaginary action. By focusing on a single act and repeating it, we can bring it to life and make it feel real. Otherwise, our attention may drift and be filled with a multitude of related images. In just a matter of seconds, they will transport us hundreds of miles away from our intended destination in terms of distance and years away in terms of time. If we choose to climb a specific flight of stairs, it's important to focus solely on that action. We need to stay focused on climbing the flight of stairs, treating it as if it were a real action until it becomes vivid and tangible in our minds. The concept should be conveyed in a way that requires minimal effort on our part. We need to make sure that the mind easily grasps the feeling of the wish being fulfilled. Being slightly drowsy can help us stay focused without much effort. However, we shouldn't let ourselves fall into deep sleep, as it would make it difficult to control our attention. Instead, it's best to maintain a moderate level of drowsiness where we can still guide our thoughts. One way to bring our desires to life is by imagining and feeling as if they have already been fulfilled. In a calm and relaxed state, we can repeat a simple phrase like a soothing lullaby that implies our desire has been realized. This can be done with gratitude, as if we are thanking a higher power for making it happen. On the other hand, if we want to explore a bigger world, we need to stay active until we fall asleep. Imagine vividly what you would experience if you achieved your goal, and eventually you will encounter it in reality just as you envisioned. Nourish the mind with premises, statements believed to be true, because assumptions, even if they are not tangible, can become facts when they are consistently embraced and start to feel real. All means that support the realization of an assumption are considered favorable. It has a profound impact on everyone, guiding their actions, words, and movements towards its realization. In order to grasp how individuals shape their future in alignment with their assumptions, it is important to comprehend the concept of a dimensionally larger world. This larger world is where we venture to make changes to our future. When we observe an event before it happens, it suggests that the event was already set in motion from our perspective in the three-dimensional world. Thus, in order to alter the conditions in the three dimensions of space, we must first modify them in the four dimensions of space. It is challenging for humans to comprehend the concept of a world that is larger in dimensions, and they would likely reject the idea of a self that exists in such a world. He has a good grasp of the three dimensions of length, width, and height. He believes that if there were a fourth dimension, it would be just as apparent to him as the other dimensions. A dimension is not just a line. It encompasses various ways in which an object can be measured, each distinct from the others. To measure a solid in the fourth dimension, we can measure it in any direction other than its length, width, and height. Are there alternative methods for measuring an object aside from its dimensions of length, width, and height? Time quantifies my existence without utilizing the three dimensions of length, width, and height. Objects cannot appear or disappear instantaneously. You can easily measure its appearance and disappearance. It lasts for a specific duration. Measuring its lifespan doesn't require complicated measurements like length, width, and height. Time is definitely a fourth way of measuring an object. The more dimensions an object has, the more substantial and real it becomes. A straight line, which lies entirely in one dimension, acquires shape, mass, and substance by the addition of dimensions. What new quality would time, the fourth dimension, give which would make it just as vastly superior to solids as solids are to surfaces and surfaces are to lines? Time is a medium for changes in experience because all changes take time. The new quality is changeability. Observe that if we bisect a solid, its cross-section will be a surface. By bisecting a surface, we obtain a line, and by bisecting a line, we get a point. This means that a point is but a cross-section of a line, which is in turn but a cross-section of a surface, which is in turn but a cross-section of a solid, which is in turn, if carried to its logical conclusion, but a cross-section of a four-dimensional object. We cannot avoid the inference that all three-dimensional objects are but cross-sections of four-dimensional bodies, which means when I meet you, I meet a cross-section of the four-dimensional you, the four-dimension self that is not seen. To see the four-dimensional self, I must see every cross-section or moment of your life from birth to death and see them all as coexisting. My focus should take in the entire array of sensory impressions which you have experienced on Earth plus those you might encounter. I should see them, not in the order in which they were experienced by you, but as a present whole. Because change is the characteristic of the fourth dimension, I should see them in a state of flux as a living, animated whole. If we have all this clearly fixed in our minds, what does it mean to us in this three-dimensional world? It means that if we can move along time's length, we can see the future and alter it as we so desire. This world, which we think so solidly real, is a shadow out of which and beyond which we may at any time pass. It is an abstraction from a more fundamental and dimensionally larger world, a more fundamental world abstracted from a still more fundamental and dimensionally larger world, and so on, to infinity. The absolute is unattainable by any means or analysis, no matter how many dimensions we add to the world. Man can prove the existence of a dimensionally larger world simply by focusing his attention on an invisible state and imagining that he sees and feels it. If he remains concentrated in this state, his present environment will pass away, and he will awaken in a dimensionally larger world where the object of his contemplation will be seen as a concrete, objective reality. Intuitively, I feel that, were he to abstract his thoughts from this dimensionally larger world and retreat still farther within his mind, he would again bring about an externalization of time. He would discover that every time he retreats into his inner mind and brings about an externalization of time, space becomes dimensionally larger, and he would therefore conclude that both time and space are serial, and that the drama of life is but the climbing of a multitudinous dimensional time block. Scientists will one day explain why there is a serial universe, but in practice, how we use this serial universe to change the future is more important. To change the future, we need only concern ourselves with two worlds in the infinite series, the world we know by reason of our bodily organs and the world we perceive independently of our bodily organs. Lesson 2. Assumption becomes facts. Men believe in the reality of the external world because they do not know how to focus and condense their powers to penetrate its thin crust. This book has only one purpose: the removing of the veil of the senses, the traveling into another world. To remove the veil of the senses, we do not employ great effort. The objective world vanishes by turning our attention away from it. We have only to concentrate on the state desired in order to mentally see it, but to give it reality so that it will become an objective fact, we must focus attention upon the invisible state until it has the feeling of reality. When, through concentrated attention, our desire appears to possess the distinctness and feeling of reality, we have given it the right to become a visible, concrete fact. If it is difficult to control the direction of your attention while in a state akin to sleep, you may find gazing fixedly into an object very helpful. Do not look at its surface, but into and beyond any plane object such as a wall, a carpet, or any other object which possesses depth. Arrange it to return as little reflection as possible. Imagine then that in this depth you are seeing and hearing what you want to see and hear until your attention is exclusively occupied by the imagined state. At the end of your meditation, when you awake from your controlled waking dream, you feel as though you had returned from a great distance. The visible world which you had shut out returns to consciousness, and by its very presence informs you that you have been self-deceived into believing that the object of your contemplation was real. But if you know that consciousness is the one and only reality, you will remain faithful to your vision, and by this sustained mental attitude, confirm your gift of reality, and prove that you have the power to give reality to your desires that they may become visible, concrete facts. Define your ideal and concentrate your attention upon the idea of identifying yourself with your ideal. Assume the feeling of being it, the feeling that would be yours were you already the embodiment of your ideal. Then live and act upon this conviction. This assumption, though denied by the senses, if persisted in, will become fact. You will know when you have succeeded in fixing the desired state in consciousness by simply looking mentally at the people you know. In dialogues with yourself, you are less inhibited and more sincere than in actual conversations with others. Therefore, the opportunity for self-analysis arises when you are surprised by your mental conversations with others. If you see them as you formerly saw them, you have not changed your concept of self, for all changes of concepts of self result in a changed relationship to your world. In your meditation, allow others to see you as they would see you with this new concept of self, a concrete fact. You always seem to others an embodiment of the ideal you inspire. Therefore, in meditation, when you contemplate others, you must be seen by them mentally as you would be seen by them physically, were your concept of self an objective fact. That is, in meditation, you imagine that they see you expressing that which you desire to be. If you assume that you are what you want to be, your desire is fulfilled, and, in fulfillment, all longing is neutralized. You cannot continue desiring what you have already realized. Your desire is not something you labor to fulfill. It is recognizing something you already possess. It is assuming the feeling of being that which you desire to be. If, however, it is the good of others that you desire, then in meditation, you must represent them to yourself as already being that which you desire them to be. It is through desire that you rise above your present sphere, and the road from longing to fulfillment is shortened. As you experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh, were you already the embodiment of the ideal you desire to be. I have stated that man has at every moment of time the choice before him, which of several futures he will encounter. But the question arises, how is that possible when the experiences of man, awake in the three-dimensional world, are predetermined, as his observation of an event before it occurs implies? This ability to change the future will be seen if we liken the experiences of life on Earth to this printed page. Man experiences events on Earth singly and successively in the same way that you are now experiencing the words of this page. Imagine that every word on this page represents a single sensory impression. To get the context, to understand my meaning, you focus your vision of the first word in the upper left-hand corner and then move your focus across the page from left to right, letting it fall on the word singly and successively. By the time your eyes reach the last word on this page, you have extracted my meaning. Suppose, however, on looking at the page with all the printed words thereon equally present, you decided to rearrange them. You could, by rearranging them, tell an entirely different story. In fact, you could tell many different stories. When we have learned to control the movements of our attention in the four-dimensional world, we shall be able to consciously create circumstances in the three-dimensional world. We learn this control through the waking dream, where our attention can be maintained without effort, for attention minus effort is indispensable to changing the future. We can, in a controlled waking dream, consciously construct an event which we desire to experience in the three-dimensional world. The sensory impressions we use to construct our waking dream are present realities displaced in time or the four-dimensional world. All that we do in constructing the waking dream is to select from the vast array of sensory impressions those which, when they are properly arranged, imply that we have realized our desire. With the dream clearly defined, we relax in a chair and induce a state of consciousness akin to sleep, a state which, although bordering on sleep, leaves us in conscious control of the movements of our attention. When we have achieved that state, we experience in imagination what we would experience in reality were this waking dream an objective fact. In applying this technique to change the future, it is important always to remember that the only thing which occupies the mind during the waking dream is the waking dream, the predetermined action which implies the fulfillment of our desire. How the waking dream becomes physical fact is not our concern. Our acceptance of the waking dream as physical reality wills the means for its fulfillment. Let me again lay the foundation of changing the future, which is nothing more than a controlled waking dream. Define your objective, know definitely what you want. Construct an event which you believe you will encounter, following the fulfillment of your desire, something which will have the action of self-predominant, an event which implies the fulfillment of your desire. Immobilize the physical body and induce a state of consciousness akin to sleep. Then, mentally feel yourself right into the proposed action, imagining all the while that you are actually performing the action here and now, so that you experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh were you now to realize your goal. Lesson 3. Your own wonderful imagination. Men claim that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates. This means that if I, while imprisoned, suggest to myself that I am free and succeed in believing that I am free, it is true that I believe in my freedom, but it does not follow that I am free, for I may be the victim of illusion. But because of my own experiences, I have come to believe in so many strange things that I see little reason to doubt the truth of things that are beyond my experience. We are called upon to deny the evidence of our senses and to imagine as true of our neighbor that which makes him free. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. To know the truth of our neighbor, we must assume that he is already that which he desires to be. Any concept we hold of another that is short of his fulfilled desire will not make him free, and therefore cannot be the truth. Instead of learning my craft in schools, where attending courses and seminars is considered a substitute for self-acquired knowledge, my schooling was devoted almost exclusively to the power of imagination. I stayed for hours imagining myself to be other than that which my reason and my senses dictated, until the imagined states were vivid as reality, so vivid that passerby became but a part of my imagination and acted as I would have them. By the power of imagination, my fantasy led theirs and dictated to them their behavior and the discourse they held together, while I was identified with my imagined state. In meditation, when the brain grows luminous, I find my imagination endowed with the magnetic power to attract to me whatsoever I desire. Desire is the power imagination uses to fashion life about me as I fashion it within myself. I first desire to see a certain person or scene, and then I look at though I were seeing that which I want to see, and the imagined state becomes objectively real. I desire to hear, and then I listen as though I were hearing, and the imagined voice speaks that which I dictate as though it had initiated the message. I could give you many examples to prove my arguments, to prove that these imagined states do become physical realities, but I know that my examples will awaken, in all who have not met the like or who are not inclined towards my arguments, a most natural incredulity. For I have in intense meditation called things that were not seen as though they were, and the unseen not only became seen, but eventually became physical realities. By this method, first desiring and then imagining that we are experiencing that which we desire to experience, we can mold the future in harmony with our desire. But let us follow the advice of the Prophet and think only the lovely and the good, for the imagination waits on us as indifferently and as swiftly when our nature is evil as when it is good. From us spring forth good and evil. Desire and imagination are the enchanter's wand of fable, and they draw to themselves their own affinities. They break forth best when the mind is in a state akin to sleep. I have written with some care and detail the method I sue to enter the dimensionally larger world, but I shall give one more formula for opening the door of the larger world. In dream we are usually the servant of our vision rather than its master, but the internal fantasy of dream can be turned into an external reality. In dream, as in mediation, we slip from this world into a dimensionally larger world, and I know that the forms in dream are not flat two-dimensional images which modern psychologists believe them to be. They are substantial realities of the dimensionally larger world, and I can lay hold of them. I have discovered that, if I surprise myself dreaming, I can lay hold of any inanimate or stationary form of the dream, a chair, a table, a stairway, a tree, and command to awake. While firmly holding on the object of the dream, I am pulled through myself with the distinct feeling of awakening from dream. I awaken in another sphere, holding the object of my dream, to find that I am no longer the servant of my vision, but its master, for I am fully conscious and in control of the movements of my attention. It is in this fully conscious state, when we are in control of the direction of thought, that we call things that are not seen as though they were. In this state we call things by wishing and assuming the feeling of our wish fulfilled. Unlike the world of three dimensions, where there is an interval between our assumption and its fulfillment, in the dimensionally larger world, there is an immediate realization of our assumption. The external reality instantly mirrors our assumption. Here there is no need to wait 4 months till harvest. We look again as though we saw, and lo and behold, the fields are already white to harvest. In this dimensionally larger world, ye shall not need to fight. Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you. 2 Chronicles 20:17. And because that greater world is slowly passing through our three-dimensional world, we can, by the power of imagination, mold our world in harmony with our desire. Look as though you saw, listen as though you heard, stretch forth your imaginary hand as though you touched, and your assumptions will harden into facts. To those who believe that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates, this will be foolishness and a stumbling block. But I preach and practice the fixing in consciousness of that which man desires to realize. Experience convinces me that fixed attitudes of mind, which do not conform to the external reality to which they relate and are therefore called imaginary, things which are not, will, nevertheless, bring to naught things that are. Look back over the good resolutions with which many past New Years are encumbered. They lived a little while, and then they died. Why? Because they were severed from their root. Assume that you are that which you want to be. Experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh, were you already that which you want to be. Remain faithful to your assumption, so that you define yourself as that which you have assumed. Lesson 4. Change your self-concept. The ideal we serve and strive to attain could never be evolved from us were it not potentially involved in our nature. It is now my purpose to retell and to emphasize an experience of mine printed by me 2 years ago. I believe these quotations from The Search will help us to understand the operation of the law of consciousness and show us that we have no one to change but self. Once in an idle interval at sea, I meditated on the perfect state and wondered what I would be were I of too pure eyes to behold inequity, if to me all things were pure and were I without condemnation. As I became lost in this fiery brooding, I found myself lifted above the dark environment of the senses. So intense was feeling, I felt myself a being of fire dwelling in a body of air. Voices as from a heavenly chorus, with the exaltation of those who had been conquerors in a conflict with death, were singing, "He is risen, he is risen," and intuitively I knew they meant me. Then I seemed to be walking in the night. I soon came upon a scene that might have been the ancient pool of Bethesda, for in this place lay a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, halt, withered, waiting not for the moving of the water as of tradition, but waiting for me. As I came near, without thought or effort on my part, they were, one after the other, molded as by the magician of the beautiful. Eyes, hands, feet, all missing members, were drawn from some invisible reservoir and molded in harmony with that perfection which I felt springing within me. When all were made perfect, the chorus exulted, "It is finished." Then the scene dissolved and I awoke. I know the vision was the result of my intense meditation upon the idea of perfection, for my meditations invariably bring about union with the state contemplated. I had been so completely absorbed within the idea that for a while I had become what I contemplated, and the high purpose with which I had for that moment identified myself drew the companionship of high things and fashioned the vision in harmony with my inner nature. The ideal with which we are united works by association of ideals to awaken 1,000 moods, to create a drama in keeping with the central idea. My mystical experiences have convinced me that there is no way to bring about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. In the divine economy, nothing is lost. We cannot lose anything save by descent from the sphere where the thing has its natural life. There is no transforming power in death, and whether we are here or there, we fashion the world that surrounds us by the intensity of our imagination and feeling, and we illuminate or darken our lives by the concepts we hold of ourselves. Nothing is more important to us than our conception of ourselves, and especially is this true of our concept of the dimensionally great one within us. Those who help or hinder us, whether they know it or not, are the servants of that law which shapes outward circumstances in harmony with our inner nature. It is our conception of ourselves which frees or constrains us, though it may use material agencies to achieve its purpose. Because life molds the outer world to reflect the inner arrangement of our minds, there is no way of bringing about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. No help cometh from without. The hills to which we lift our eyes are those of an inner range. It is thus to our own consciousness that we must turn as to the only reality, the only foundation on which all phenomena can be explained. We can rely absolutely on the justice of this law to give us only that which is of the nature of ourselves. To attempt to change the world before we change our concept of ourselves is to struggle against the nature of things. There can be no outer change until there is first an inner change. As within, so without. I am not advocating philosophical indifference when I suggest that we should imagine ourselves as already that which we want to be, living in a mental atmosphere of greatness, rather than using physical means and arguments to bring about the desired change. Everything we do unaccompanied by a change of consciousness is but futile readjustment of surfaces. However we toil or struggle, we can receive no more than our assumptions affirm. To protest against anything which happens to us is to protest against the law of our being and our rulership over our own destiny. The circumstances of my life are too closely related to my conception of myself not to have been formed by my own spirit from some dimensionally larger storehouse of my being. If there is pain to me in these happenings, I should look within myself for the cause, for I am moved here and there and made to live in a world in harmony with my concept of myself. Intense meditation brings about a union with the state contemplated, and during this union we see visions, have experiences, and behave in keeping with our change of consciousness. This shows us that a transformation of consciousness will result in a change of environment and behavior. All wars prove that violent emotions are extremely potent in precipitating mental rearrangements. Every great conflict has been followed by an era of materialism and greed, in which the ideals for which the conflict ostensibly were waged are submerged. This is inevitable because war evokes hate, which impels a descent in consciousness from the plane of the ideal to the level where the conflict is waged. If we could become as emotionally aroused over our ideals as we become over our dislikes, we would ascend to the plane of our ideal as easily as we now descend to the level or our hates. Love and hate have a magical transforming power, and we grow through their exercise into the likeness of what we contemplate. By intensity of hatred, we create in ourselves the character we imagine in our enemies. There is nothing to change but our concept of self. As soon as we succeed in transforming self, our world will dissolve and reshape itself in harmony with that which our change affirms.